Hey everybody, it's Innovision, and I've come to answer a question that I've been asked at least 1,000 times. Which operating system is the best for gaming? It really boils down to personal preference. What matters most to you? Performance, game library compatibility, portability, console-like gaming experience, etc. These are the different buckets of problems that different operating systems are actively trying to address. Now, we've seen a lot in the handheld space. SteamOS tends to be well optimized, gives you a nice console-like experience, does have less compatibility than Windows. In all of my personal experience and benchmarks, I would say it takes the crown across all of these buckets. But I really wanted to see how well does this translate into high-performance desktop PC gaming space. I put together a study that's going to be part of a series of studies where I'm looking at the performance of Bazzite OS versus Windows 11 using a Core i7 137K with 32 gigs of DDR5 RAM and a RX 9070 XT overclocked edition. And to be honest, the results were shocking. Stick around because you don't want to miss any of it. As we get started, let's describe the test setup. I use one of my desktop gaming PCs that has this RX 9070 XT overclocked edition installed. It's got the Core i7 137K and it's got 32 gigs of DDR5 memory. And the nice thing about this graphics card is that it's supported under SteamOS, Bazzite, CachyOS, Windows, pretty much across the board. So there's a lot of neat things that we're going to be able to do with it. I'm using the latest version of Windows 11 public release, as well as the latest version of Bazzite OS. I'm not using any exotic Proton versions. I'm just using the stock version that ships with Bazzite that it's automatically configured to use. I'm on an ultra-wide high frame rate gaming monitor with a resolution of 3440 by 1440. HDR is disabled in all of these tests. And the three games we're going to take a look at are Cyberpunk 2077, Black Myth Wukong, and Ratchet and Clank A Rift Apart. And for all of these games, we're using the exact same settings for both Windows 11 and Bazzite OS. For each of these three games, we're going to take a look at a side-by-side comparison of it running under Windows 11 and Bazzite. And these are going to be either gaming benchmarks or real gameplay, followed by an in-depth analysis of how well the game performed under each of these systems. And one really neat thing about this analysis, I've included both the CPU and GPU temperature so we can get a glimpse at which system's having to work harder. All right, it's time for the fun part. Let's get started.
Si el mundo necesita un líder, Bazzite Corporation estará a la altura. Únete hoy por un mañana mejor. La paz es frágil. Fortalécela con los sistemas soldados de Bazzite. En cualquier lugar, a cualquier momento.
Here we have a graph of the average FPS while running Cyberpunk 2077. Our blue bar corresponds to Windows 11 average FPS, our purple bar corresponds to Bazzite OS average FPS, light blue is Windows 11 1% low frames, and light purple is Bazzite OS 1% low frames. And you can just see across the board, Windows has a significant advantage over Bazzite OS, both in terms of average FPS and quality of service, or our 1% low frames. And to be exact, Windows has about a 17% performance advantage. Now let's take a look at the max CPU and GPU temperatures while running Cyberpunk 2077. Blue corresponds to Windows 11 temperatures and purple corresponds to Bazzite OS temperatures. From left to right, we've got CPU followed by GPU, and we can see Bazzite OS is running a pretty decent amount cooler. So this leads me to believe that Bazzite is not having to work as hard as Windows. This tells me that the CPU is spinning way more under Windows. I would attribute this to either the Linux kernel or Bazzite OS having a better CPU scheduler. Now let's take a look at the performance of running Black Myth Wukong on my gaming PC. Here we have a graph of our average FPS while running Black Myth Wukong on our system. Blue corresponds to Windows 11 and purple corresponds to Bazzite OS. Our light blue and light purple correspond to our 1% low frames. And we can see here that Bazzite OS has slightly better performance both in terms of average FPS and quality of service, or 1% low frames. I would think they should have equivalent performance, or Bazzite might perform slightly worse. This tells me that AMD Radeon drivers are pretty well optimized under Linux. Wow, okay, here we have a graph of our temperatures while running Black Myth Wukong. Blue is Windows 11, purple is Bazzite OS. From left to right, we've got CPU followed by GPU. And look at the numbers for CPU here. Whoa. So Bazzite OS is running significantly cooler. This comes out to about 25% cooler. And for the GPU, we don't see much of a difference there, but it's also trending lower than Windows. And so again, something about Windows, it's just spinning the CPU and doing more work than is necessary here. Now let's take a look at gameplay performance of Ratchet and Clank: A Rift Apart on my gaming PC.
Whoa! Watch your head! This is... Sand sharks from above. Was that a kraken? Or at least a very large octopus.
Look, it's Ratchet and Clank.
Here we have a graph of our average FPS while running Ratchet and Clank. Blue is Windows 11, purple is Bazzite, light blue and light purple correspond to our 1% low frames. This looks crazy. We'll get to that in a second. But just looking at the average FPS here, we see that Windows has about a 14% performance advantage over Bazzite OS. And, you know, this is not surprising. Some games are going to run better on one system versus the other. But still, I mean, at 100 frames a second, the game's super buttery smooth, very playable. I don't have any qualms with that. If I'm going for the console-like experience, I'm okay with running at 100 frames per second versus 114 frames per second just to have that smooth console-like experience. I can't tell you how many times I turn on my computer and start doing computer things instead of playing my games. So that's a small price to pay. Now, I have no earthly idea what's going on with the 1% low frames on Windows. I ran this 3 different times and got the same thing each time. Now, I do have a hypothesis here. When you load Ratchet and Clank and you go into the game from the title screen, it fades into the game engine itself. And so maybe while it's doing this fading, frames are being dropped and it's just not noticeable because the whole game hasn't loaded yet. But while playing, I never saw this huge drop that we see here in this graph. Another hypothesis would be that possibly the tooling that makes measurements for the frame rate could have a bug in its algorithm. That one's a little bit less likely because these tools are hammered on by thousands of people. If there were any problems, these bugs would be worked out. So I'm leaning more towards the time that this frame drop happened was before the game becomes fully visible. Here we have our graph of the max temperature observed while playing Ratchet and Clank under both Windows 11 and Bazzite OS. Again, blue is Windows, purple is Bazzite. From left to right, we've got CPU followed by GPU temperature. And again, there's not much to summarize here other than we see the same trend we saw with the other 2 games. Bazzite OS runs significantly cooler than Windows. So you know I'm going to be taking this same GPU for a stroll under steamos and CachyOS. If there's anything else everyone would like to see, hit me up in the comments section. Let me know whether it's some other games you'd like to see performance tested or different settings for these games. I am hyped about putting this next series of videos together. These are some of my favorite and most fun videos to work on. It's your feedback and discussion in the comments section that helps drive future videos, future work, and grow our community. Hype the video, hit that like button, and subscribe. That way you don't miss all the tech, toys, and gaming tips we've got coming down the pipeline.